My name is Sean Broderson. I live here in Columbia, South Carolina. I have been working at Capgemini now for about 2.5 years. Been here in Columbia for about 17 years or so. Executive Vice President and Executive Committee member for the Strategic Business Unit here in the Americas. So we are responsible for Canada to Brazil, east to west. You probably have seen our logo around. Some of my peers do some stuff with the school. If you've been over to Bull Street, you might have seen our logo on the first base building. So that's where our office is. It's a pretty cool office. We can actually watch the baseball game from the office itself. Okay, so hopefully this is interactive. I've got some slides that my EA helped throw together for me. We can move at pace. If you have questions, don't hesitate to raise your hand and ask questions, okay? So a little bit about me. I started in Connecticut. You heard Eastern Connecticut State University. I grew up in Connecticut. And my first job out of school was at Pratt & Whitney. They make jet engines, still do. Amazing company. They were doing this little project called SAP. I had no idea what that was, but it sits right at the intersection of technology and business. And I'm still doing SAP today, along with other package-based solutions. That's what PBS stood for in my title. So Oracle, Microsoft, Workday, Salesforce, etc. Right? Let's see. I thought you might be interested in kind of like, well, what was your career path? Like, how did you get to be EVP of the fifth largest SI on the planet? It's perhaps not a usual path. I started in something called organizational change management. And so this was things like mapping existing processes, mapping new processes, business processes. Like how do you process that sales order? Or how do you actually make an engine on the shop floor, taking an engineering bill of material, converting it to a manufacturing bill of material, creating an assembly bill of material, mapping that on the floor, how many cells feed into a particular line, how are you going to use production orders to generate and capture the bills of material and the requirements for those things? How are you going to plan for that strategically? How are you going to do the procurement for those materials and so on and so forth? Like it's that kind of thing. And then what's the impact of the people's lives when you change what they do by implementing a new system, right? So one thing that you may or may not take for granted, given where you are, your stage of life, is that change is hard. People don't like to change. I know that because if you go home and tomorrow morning when you put your socks and shoes on, try to put them on in a different order than you do every single day, and your brain will fight you. Gather them up and do it like you normally would, right? Obviously, if you left your shoes in the other room, you might go, okay, put my socks on, go get them. But if you do it like you do every other day, your brain will fight you for doing it out of order. Whether you believe that or not, you have a sequence that you prefer. So change is hard, and that's what OCM really is designed to do. It's about organizational change management, people understanding why we're changing and what's my future look like, right? So I live in PowerPoint and Excel pretty much at this stage of my career. But the people that we implement these systems for, they might be in a manufacturing execution system. They might be in a custom program that was developed for them to do their work. And now we go in and we say, everything that you do is going to be different. Everything. And here's a new application. So getting them trained, getting them enabled, understanding why the change is there, getting them to adopt and sustain the change is really important. I did some work in data architecture, analytics right after that. So it was a natural sort of progression to take the processes that I've learned, associate the data that is important about those processes, and then be able to deliver insights to the businesses on those processes and the data that's supporting them. Became a functional consultant or a functional person. I was still an employee of Pratt & Whitney at the time, where I started to learn some of the things that I've been talking to you about. Like, how does the system actually enable these processes? What settings would you need to make in order to support this particular part of the business, right? So even though they make jet engines and a lot of different kinds of jet engines, sometimes the way that they make them changes. And behaviors that they have with their clients and their customers changes. If you're doing government work, there's other requirements like government furnished equipment, government furnished materials, etc., reporting and accountability things that colors of money that impact what they would need to do as an example. So that's what functional was. It basically means designing the system around those needs. Maybe you've heard like a business analyst term. So you can think of it as sort of like a business analyst on steroids, right? Interpreting business needs into technical requirements and then getting the system to support that. Became an SA, which is a solution architect, and solution architect is basically the top of the pyramid for designing systems. There's other architectural paradigms. Probably the one that you've heard most about might be like enterprise architect. That's a lot more common. And in fact, we did a session with some USC students at the Capgemini campus on what is enterprise architecture of the future. And I was part of that presentation as well. This is solution architecture. It's a little bit more blended, a little bit less technical, a little bit more blended, a little bit less focused on methodologies and philosophies and frameworks and these kinds of things about how you should do something. And it's more about actually the overall implementation of whatever technology might be sitting in front of you and doing that successfully. So you are the person responsible for the delivering the outcome to the business. Cross business line big bids. So I moved into the commercial side of the house. And by commercial, working for one, the company that I worked for then, but even now, right? We are constantly positioning to sell more consulting services or differentiated consulting services. We have to understand what our clients are buying, what their needs are. The best way to do this is to have a lot of industry depth, a lot of client intimacy, so that you understand and can anticipate their needs before they even ask you for them, right? That's the best potential scenario. And then aligning yourself commercially to their outcomes and success. Some people want to work with you in a time and materials fashion. Some people want to work with you in fixed price. Some people might get innovative and say, I'll give you a percentage of the money that you help me save or make, and those kinds of things. So cross business line means aligning all kinds of technology players and teams to a single construct and putting that into a commercial proposal. Yeah, it's so what I just described is true of the industry. My particular role was cross business line, meaning within the company, I would take like the insights and data team, the infrastructure team, the SAP team, the Microsoft team, and I would blend everything that they have from a capabilities perspective into a proposal or a proposition that the client wanted to buy. So it was an internal role, but especially at a company like Capgemini, 350,000 practitioners. There's a lot of teams and segments that you have to bring together. And then I moved into business line leadership. And so while I'm still close to the technology, my day is wrapped around running a business. My business line is close to $1 billion or so. That's about the revenue that I drive for the Americas. It's not quite $1 billion, but hopefully by the end of the year, we'll see. See what happens with tariffs. Tariffs actually have a very real impact on us. We've already had one client call us up and say, that big project we were going to do with you, I'm not sure now is the time to spend my capital. I'm going to pause that expenditure and we'll get back to you next year. So that's not ideal. I love building teams and organizations that make the world's best companies better. And I think a lot of people are kind of like, what is consulting really? And other than selling people that do work on behalf of another company, I think you have to think about the outcome that you deliver. And it really is, you get up every day and you have the opportunity to make the world's best companies better. I'll give you some examples of the companies that I've been fortunate enough to work in. So what do they say? Do you have 3 careers on average or something like that? Is that what they say? So old days. So, okay, so maybe 4 careers. So maybe you get to work with 4 different companies then. I can work with 4 different companies in a day. In a particular trip, I like to talk about one trip that I made. It was about 2 years ago, and it was just because it was very impactful to me. So I'd flown to the West Coast and I met with Boeing. I'd come down the West Coast and I met with Disney. I started to come east and I met with Coca-Cola. And then I went up to the Northeast and finished my week with a life sciences company called CSL. These are these are like titans of each of their respective industries. These are household brand names. And each one has their own challenges, unique, but also similar. And my job is to do pattern matching, pattern identification, pattern matching, and figure out how we can help all those customers. So like that's the thing that's interesting about consulting. If you're thinking about a career and you're like, what do I want to do? That is the variability that you have the opportunity to enjoy in consulting, which is pretty exciting in my view. You can't find that too many other places. Like I did that in 1 week. And some people might not do that in a career. Hobbies. I like golf, bourbon, and I've got a 12-year-old, so girl dad stuff. She's does cheer and all those kinds of things, which I know nothing about, but I yell really loud. Okay, so a lot of people like to know, like, well, what do you read? And so there's some examples of things that I have read that were impactful to me. Range. So who knows about the 10,000 hour principle? Malcolm Gladwell, 10,000 hours. You're tells a lot of stories about athletes and about muscle memory and about how it becomes like ingrained in you after 10,000 hours of doing anything, right? Range basically is the opposite. Range says how to succeed as a generalist in a hyper specialized world. And so, one thing for you guys to think about, and I noticed that in your curricula, even though you're an IT centric curricula, you also have to pick a business course, right? I don't know if it was one or it was two, but that starts to give you range, right? So it's great to have a niche, be known for your niche, but in today's business world, having that range is very important. So how are your business communication skills? Do you have great presence? Are you able to articulate and hold somebody's attention? How about your understanding of the sales process or of project management, or the financials that sit underneath the company, and these kinds of things, right? So range is super important in my opinion. And that's basically what that book is about. It's about being broad. One might say that my specialty is range. I was never particularly deep in anything. I learned how to code in 5 different languages. You'd never ask me to build you a custom program, right? But I could do it. I'm very good at pattern identification and pattern matching and holding people accountable. That's kind of my skill. Good to Great, Surrounded by Idiots is a very interesting book about how to deal with individuals. I like books with titles that grab your attention. So that's certainly one of them. I think you'd enjoy reading about that. Shoe Dog is the story about Phil Knight and how he grew Nike. So that's a very interesting book about leadership and about drive and his story. And then last is Radical Candor, which is a book about leadership style. Basically the essence of it is that you do people no favors if you can't have a real authentic conversation with them about what they're doing well and what they're not doing so well. And so Radical Candor is what that book is about. So those are some examples. Capgemini is as was introduced at the beginning. It's a large company, 350,000 or so people spread around the world, headquartered in Paris, France. We have, we obviously are in the Americas strategic business unit. And this list is some of our brands here, gives you an idea of sort of the range that we have ourselves. So Cambridge Consulting are highly specialized consultings, research, development, and all kinds of interesting things. Just last week, I was with a life sciences company, and one of the Cambridge guys was explaining how they have developed new proteins that was, in their own research that was going to be interesting for that company. Frog is a design house, so they do stuff with some of the highest end brand houses in the world, so LVH and so on and so forth, and they're very, very good at high end product design as well as experiential design. What does your website look like? How do people experience you as a company? We have let's see what else is on here. Capgemini Engineering. So we acquired the world's largest engineering outsource company 8 or 9 years ago, something like that. And so we engineer products on behalf of other companies. One of the ones that I'm most amazed about is that in our engineering lab in India, we've engineered a pacemaker the size of a grain of rice, which is pretty cool. Don't ask me how it works. That's beyond my knowledge, but it is pretty cool. We do robotics. We acquired a robotics company. Another story that was pretty interesting to me was a fake dog that can sit on your lap. So, and the reason for this is that the actual inventor's mom had a condition that was made better. It was prolonged. The quality of life was prolonged by having a real dog. But at some point, she needed to be in a home. You can't have a real dog in a home, you know. And so he was like, "Well, I still want to contribute to prolonging her life." And so he invented a dog that responded to her like a dog would if he scratched her ears or patted it on the back and that kind of stuff. And so Capgemini took that and made it something that was commercially viable and to produce and to sell. So we do some pretty interesting stuff. There's a whole bunch of other brands, to say what we cover from an IT perspective, infrastructure, security, obviously is a huge one and continues to grow in importance. We have applications consulting, so package-based applications like what I'm responsible for. We also have something called C&CA, cloud and cloud applications. So these are bespoke applications, lots of different technologies. I think it was mentioned earlier, Angular and React and these kinds of things. So all of that certainly applies. They also are doing a lot with AI, as you might expect. We have another business line called Insights and Data. Insights and Data looks at big data, how to leverage data science, how to do analytics, say to help organizations get the most out of that architecture. So we do enterprise data architecture as well as specific data products like Snowflake as an example, right? Let's see, what else am I missing? Yeah, at Coca-Cola. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's accurate. Not only did we do that, but we actually implemented on the back end of that. Those machines are all connected to an application that tracks the inventory level, so the quantity of syrups in the machines, what people are mixing, because basically you are doing R&D for the company. So when you decide to put three things together that the company never thought of before, like they see how many people pick those same three things, right? And so they're actually data mining out of that. So all those things that you take as a convenience and sort of fun, they're actually turning into data insights and monetization, and we run the backbone that does that as well. So yeah, Coca-Cola is one of our largest customers in North America. Actually, we do all the bottling. That's even more interesting. So globally, we now do CCEP, Kona, and FEMSA. So that is the bottlers in the Americas, in Europe, and Asia Pac. Yeah, that's one of our big clients. This is a little bit about my particular area, so SAP and package-based solutions, and this is a slide I use to introduce myself to my clients. A lot of our slides would look something more like this, which basically says we have a lot of people, we have a lot of customers, and people like us, right? That's basically what it says. But this actually lets us tell a little bit of story about the kinds of things that I was telling you about earlier. Like, what do consulting companies do? And hopefully they get up every day to make the world's best companies better. And here's some examples, right? So we manufacture and deliver complex assets to create clean energy. So we do work with nuclear facilities, we do work with windmill and solar facilities, and those companies make those assets that help them produce clean energy. We launched the largest US gigafactory in North America for a company called Panasonic. You might have heard of them. So they built just like Scout up the road is building a brand new factory. They built a brand new gigafactory in the middle of the US. It was the largest company investment they'd ever made at the time. And while they were doing that, we built the IT backbone and application backbone that supported that new factory. We make the world's skies safer. So there's a company called Thales that makes equipment. That equipment monitors the skies and shares that information. And so we implemented a application that helps them run their business doing that. We enabled the manufacturing for the cure to hemophilia. I was saying this just before we got started. So a company called CSL is the most expensive therapeutic ever approved by the FDA. And I think it's usually once, but sometimes twice, taking the therapeutic will cure hemophilia. So we literally save lives. Now, we didn't do the invention of the cure, okay, the therapeutic. What we did do was that they manufacture using an SAP system, and their manufacturing process was in 30-day batch runs of sort of a bulk sets of products. And this is not that. This, I need your DNA. So they take a draw from you. I'm not exactly sure if it's plasma or if it's blood or whatever it is, but they take a draw from you. And then they have 7 days to manufacture the unique therapeutic to you and get it back to you. So that's a lot different than big old vats that run for 30 days. That is, I have a slot. That slot has got your name on it. I'm not allowed to see that it's your name. It's just a generic ID as far as anybody in the plant is concerned. And I have to get that very specific thing into that 7-day slot, do what I need to do, and then get it back to you. So that's a pretty cool story. We deliver soft drinks to the world on a subscription model. That actually is the Coca-Cola story. And we build pressure control equipment to make offshore drilling safe. So we do some work with both of the world's largest oil field services companies, Baker Hughes and Schlumberger, as an example. So these are just some examples of the hundreds that we have to pick from where we're changing outcomes for companies. The world is changing. So one of my key messages to you would be always be open to change, always be exploring, figuring out how you can do things differently. That quote is attributed to a couple of different people, but Henry Ford is one of my favorites, and I love quotes. SAP is a growing and dynamic business, and so this is kind of how you might say, what's SAP got to do with with me and my curricula and maybe me as a career path. So here on the left-hand side, right-hand side, you'll see the inner ring. And so I think broadly speaking in IT, whether you choose to work for an industry, a company in industry, or you choose to work for a consulting house or whatever, you'll see four general patterns of transformation. The first is IT operations transformation. IT operations is a cost center. So you're always trying to drive costs down. What can I do to become more efficient? And so one transformation, which is associated with the other three paradigms, is always IT operations transformation. And the other three paradigms are people and OpMod, or operating model transformation. These are street level transformation programs. This is when the CEO says in his quarterly announcement, we're going to invest, X hundreds of millions of dollars in transforming our business, and it's going to fundamentally change who we are as a company and going to make us better, and here's why we're spending that money. Value chain transformation, this was probably pretty relatable during the pandemic, right? Like all of a sudden, supply chains ground to a halt. So supply chain is a value chain in a business, right? It's got a beginning, it's got an end, and the goal is to make that a lot more resilient, a lot more agile, and to move with as fast a velocity as possible. In the news recently, obviously, is a lot about tariffs that will also have an impact on supply chain. So all those supply chains run on IT infrastructure, IT security protocols, and applications that help you do that planning of what products I need, when and where and why. And last but not least is technology transformation. This is sort of the third paradigm, and technology transformation often happens when somebody says, either I've got a burning platform, or I fundamentally wants to do an upgrade of my technology because I believe that by doing so, I'm making my business better, right? I become, and a lot of times you'll see two behaviors in large companies. One is that IT is a true partner to the business and almost considered as the business, and the other you'll see it as treated basically as a cost center. And if you're interviewing, and you're like, what kind of place do I want to work in? That's a good question to ask for. Who does the CIO report to? If the CIO reports to the CFO, you'll tend to see a more progressive approach on cost management and cost takeout and being very efficient. And so a lot of business as usual kinds of things. If the CIO reports to the CEO, then that role tends to be, or even the CTO, then that role tends to be more transformational in nature. And so you'll get a lot more building of new products, a lot more innovation, a lot more investments on that side of the house. A general rule, it's not always true, but it's a general rule. So those are sort of the inner rings. And then what you can see is the Capgemini rings on the outside that I talked about. I forgot to mention Invent. Invent is our strategic consulting business. The SAP service line, business services. Business services is business process outsourcing. So like, let's say that you want to indirect procurement, you want to outsource somebody else to do it. Buying indirect procurement means buying toilet paper. Like all the indirect is all the stuff that doesn't go into your product, whatever it is that you happen to be producing and manufacturing, right? So and so you might outsource that. You might outsource your accounts payable, your accounts receivable functions, right? And so that's what business services is. ER&D we talked about. They make and build products. They do a lot right now. One of the areas that we intersect with them quite a lot is in warehouse automation. There's some really cool robotics happening in warehouse automation. You can go out and Google Amazon robotics, warehouse robotics, and you'll see the swarm logic that they've implemented. Super creative, right? So I've been in lots and lots of warehouses in my life, and they are almost all the same. Lots of rows of big racks with bins and quants and storage units, and you put stuff in. In order to get something out of those racks, you got to send somebody to go to the rack. They're walking or they're on a truck, depending on the size of the thing that they're picking, right? You know what Amazon did? Amazon said, that costs me a lot of time and money, and I can't manage the productivity of my people. So I'll make the racks come to the people. They completely inverted the entire thing. I don't know who came up with it, but that's what they've done. They've completely inverted the entire thing. A robot goes out, picks up the rack, brings the rack to the picker. The picker looks in the bins, picks what they need, confirms it, and then that thing puts it back wherever it needs to go. It also meant then that the density of what you could store in a warehouse got way higher, because I don't need to have these robots pick it up from the bottom. So it slides underneath, picks it up from the bottom. So that means I don't need room for a human being or a forklift to go down an aisle. And so all that space now became premium for Amazon. So some pretty interesting stuff that we do in ER&D. There's also a neat one, if that kind of thing interests you, in the grocery arena, and it's a grid layout, and these robots will pick your grocery order for you. There's dark warehouses, they call them, in like cities are pretty popular. So they'll take an old building in a warehouse, and they will implement this solution, and it's like where your Ship shopper or your DoorDash person, whatever, will drive up to the outside and get it. So it's a dark grocery store, a dark warehouse where there's no customers. That's why they call it dark, right? And inside is all robotics. It'll pick your grocery order, put it in a bin. The bin comes up when the driver pulls in. They hand the bin to the driver and they take it to your house. So some pretty cool stuff that's going on there. CIS is our infrastructure, landscape, and transformation arena. CNCA is our cloud and cloud native. And so all these things you can see kind of intersect with the different types of technology transformation, and the kinds of programs that I get the opportunity to drive for our clients. So this is actually an internal chart that my chief of staff pulled for me. Any questions about any of these stuff? No? Boring? Putting you to sleep? Talk about something different? Sure. What's your name? Nice to meet you, John. Yeah, we like to work with Fortune 1000 companies, and so most of them are already in trouble. Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting, to me anyway. We see these brands in our lives, and we just assume that those companies have everything together because whatever you have makes it look that way, right? Whether it's that every time you go to the grocery store, it's on the shelf, or whether you bought something that that makes your life personally better, and you enjoy using that thing that you bought. But most of these companies are saddled with technology debt, data debt, process debt. They're a fundamental mess inside. And if they could invent themselves over again, they would do it differently, right? And that's the advantage. I'm sure you've heard the phrase at some point, born digital. And that's the advantage that born digital companies have, is that they don't carry any of that debt with them. So most of the companies that we work with already have challenges, and it's about addressing those challenges and helping them move forward. Yeah. These are some of the areas and technologies that I work with in the SAP world, and the core value chain. So I've talked a lot about some of these: plan to perform, market to cash, source to pay, design to operate. So those are business value chains, and then we use technologies to enable them. At the end of the day, technology for technology's sake does not create any business value. None. You have to apply it to solve a problem, and either drive bottom line or top line improvements. That's it. It's as simple as that. If you can dream it, I can do it. So if any of this stuff is interesting to you, this is the space that I play in personally. But Capgemini, as I articulated, has all kinds of other options. Don't limit yourself to what I've said. Okay, Steve Jobs, innovation, AI. Who thinks that AI is going to change your life? Half, three quarters? Yeah, yeah. AI will change all of our lives, and it will upend the professional services industry, in my opinion, like what I do every day. So pretty much what I do today in 2025 is very, very similar to what I did in 2020, or the world, sorry, 2000. So in 25 years, what I do is not change that much. Projects are shorter, so we're able to do more than we used to in shorter periods of time. The technology is improved, so it's more reliable. I might need less people. The way that I talk to customers has changed. So we used to do as is diagrams, and we found out that basically nobody ever uses those after you create them, and so we stopped doing it, right? Like as is means, how do you do something today? So we threw them away and said, here's how you should do it. Why can't you do it this way? So yeah, we've made some fine-tuned adjustments, but basically what I do today is exactly the way that I did it in 2025 years ago. By 2030, I think we'll do everything differently. I think the next 5 years is going to be a period of significant disruption. I think that generative AI is going to take a lot of our jobs, my jobs, and we have to reinvent what we're doing. I think the intersectionality of our business lines is what gives us resiliency. And so the better we can work internally, the better chance we'll have of coming out on top, to be honest. I think for our clients, agentic AI is massive game changer. And it'll be very interesting to see how we as a company provide value to clients for agentic AI. If I just build them the robots, then what's their incentive to continue to engage with me? If I offer them agentic AI robots, an agentic army, if you will, on a subscription basis, basically digital labor, how long before they say, well, wait a minute, there's a bit of lock-in there, right? And I'm not comfortable with that lock-in. So it's going to be a very interesting world. But in my opinion, a very exciting time. We get to shape the future of our business and of our industry, and that's because we're a top 5 SI in the world. Yeah, it's very interesting. So we don't do a lot of direct product selling ourselves. We have a business called CapTech Software, which is Capgemini technology software, and we'll resell software or we'll sell pieces of software that we've acquired during acquisitions. But we generally see ourselves as a professional services firm. So we do have commercial models where it's more subscription kind of basis, and particularly in support arenas where it's like, okay, I'm going to cost you a certain amount of OpEx spend every single month for the next 5 years. And then usually that comes with a goal to have that cost you to me declining, right? Like you're expecting when you hire me to do that as to provide a business efficiency quarter over quarter, year over year. 100%. Actually, that's a very good connection that you've made. And so yes, agentic AI will reduce the cost of me to provide those services to customers, and it should drive a lot more self-service capabilities as well. Yeah, that's a very good call out. And the interesting thing is that there's kind of two schools of thought, and one is that will help improve our margins and we'll become a more profitable company. And the other school of thought basically is, well, there's a free market, and I might say I'm going to keep certain parts of those margins, but if you're my competitor, you might say, you know what, I'll just give those margins to the customer, and so the free market will have an equilibrium at some point that will drive the efficiencies and the commercial models. These are examples of some of the companies that I work with in AI and innovation around the SAP business. They're not limited to the SAP space. These are just ones that I particularly work with. One of the neat ones up here is the company called Composable. Some of these other ones are big names, and you probably would have heard them, or if you search them up, you certainly will find lots of material on them. But Composable is really neat. So, those cheese puffs with the tiger. What's the name of that snack? Cheetos. Yeah. So it takes a human being 12 years to learn how to operate the machine that makes Cheetos. That's a massive investment of the company in the human. And don't ask me why. I don't, that seems like an exceptional amount of time to learn how to operate a machine, right? But it's got to do with basically experience, the humidity and all these kinds of things that are in the product and the way that the machine is operating, at what speed it can produce the cheese puffs, all these crazy kinds of things. So this company, this Composable company, is an AI company, and they trained their model in 3 months to learn how to operate the machine. And now the model can operate the machine with a human being watching it in just 3 months, and eliminated the need to take 12 years to train somebody. So AI has some really interesting use cases and applicability across a wide range of processes, technologies, and so on and so forth. Yeah, that's one of my favorite quotes. Everybody wants to know about strategy. Strategy is pretty easy. Pick a general direction. It's about execution. That is ultimately what it comes down to. So, few minutes left. Questions for me? Interesting content. Next time you want to see something different? I mean, we've got people that have been doing this for 20 years, and they still are not great at that. It is a skill, and if you're able to, in my opinion, communicating with executives has a lot to do about simplification of your messaging, right? So executives are pretty busy. Most successful executives have been very successful about managing risk. So you need to put yourself in their shoes and kind of say, how can I take whatever this amazing amount of technical content and knowledge that I have, distill it down to the core concepts, communicate those core concepts crisply, cleanly, efficiently, and tell the executive what they need to know if you were in their shoes. So what's the risk? What's the cost? What's the upside or the opportunities, right? So you kind of have to put yourself in their shoes. Attention to detail when you're creating slides is super important. Like nothing annoys me more than looking at it's actually literally distracting if somebody creates a presentation to presents to me and let's say it's a grid of boxes and the boxes aren't lined up. Like it's fundamentally distracting to me. Like care about what you do, you know? PowerPoints are no different than designing an amazing website. Like, you put time and attention and care into what you do so that it doesn't, or a resume, so that it doesn't distract from your message. And don't put too many words on the slide. All right, if you find that you've got 500 words on your slide, then it's not a slide, it's a Word document. And that's okay. By the way, like we've moved into this whole new era of like what they call slide docs. It's like a hybrid of documents and PPTs. But then that's not one that you're presenting to. That's one you're going to send them and share with them in advance, or you put in the appendix, right? So the thing is that people can only do one of two things. They can read the slide over your shoulder, or they can listen to you. They can't do both. So really clean slides, simple messages, let them listen to you, provide the depth of content, the technology stuff that you want separately. And know your audience. If you're talking to a CTO who's like super, technical and whatever is going to grill you on your 5 technology choices, then sure, have more content, right? But if you're talking to somebody who's going to sign the check for you to do the project, you probably need a different storyboard and a different set of content. Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. And I'm sure that there was a link that I should have had. But I'll share with you how to get access to that and you can distribute to the class.